Okay, we'll go ahead and we'll get started here. And then as individuals join, we'll just welcome them and continue with our presentation. So hello all. My name is Melissa Haidar, and I serve as Health Promotion Coordinator over at the Student Health Service. On behalf of our whole health promotion team, I'd like to welcome you to our first November Think session. And so during today's session, we'll be talking about how to navigate nutrition around the holiday season. We will also be recording this session to make available to you afterwards and to those that are not able to join us over this lunch hour. As we begin, I want to first recognize our land acknowledgement, in which I will read to you now. We collectively acknowledge that we gather at NDSU, a land-grant institution, on the traditional lands of the Oceti, Sakowin, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota, and Anishinaabe peoples, in addition to many diverse Indigenous peoples still connected to these lands. We honor with gratitude Mother Earth and the Indigenous peoples who have walked with her throughout generations. We will continue to learn how to live in unity with Mother Earth and build strong, mutually beneficial, trusting relationships with Indigenous peoples of our region. Presenting today, we have Michaela Henke, who serves as our Student Health Services registered dietitian. I will give the reins over to her in just a second so that she can introduce her further and begin the presentation. We would like to thank you all for joining us and for dedicating some time out of your busy day to learn more about this important topic. Without further ado, I'll give you the reins here, Michaela, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Sounds good. Thanks, Melissa. So like she said, my name is Michaela Henke. I am the dietitian here at Student Health. So if you're a student on campus, know that this service is available for you. You can schedule an appointment through your student health portal. I'd love to see you, so definitely take advantage of that. I'm here, so you know. But yeah, today we're going to be talking about how to navigate nutrition around the holidays. So just to begin, we're going to do a little overview on some topics that we'll be touching on today. First, we're just going to try to understand the challenges, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, when it comes to looking at nutrition and how we can manage it during the holiday season. Kind of the things that make it pretty difficult, what makes it unique compared to other times of the year. From that, we're going to talk about some of the background of binge and restrict cycles and how holidays can contribute to that and really perpetuate that. We'll get into mindful eating, talking a little bit about what it is, how it can be somewhat of a solution to our struggles when it comes to nutrition around the holiday season. I'll give you some practical tips on how you can start doing that. And then at the end, we'll talk about really practical tips on like the day of a holiday, how we can set up our nutrition so that we're feeling well, we're not feeling deprived, but we also don't fall into a binge and then restrict cycle. And then at the end, there'll be an opportunity to ask any questions. I'll be asking you guys questions throughout, so be active in the chat. If you have anything, feel free to put it in there. But yeah, there will be an opportunity at the end to ask questions as well. So to start, nutrition in the holiday season, why does nutrition become more challenging around the holidays? Does anybody have any thoughts? You can throw it in the chat. Yeah, just anything. Let me see if I can. Melissa, do you know if the chat just pops up or should I have the Zoom open?
I think you may have to go back in and you'll have to click to open it up as well. Okay. We'll watch it for you too throughout.
Okay. I don't know if I can see it right now. Let me take a look here. Oh, here we go. Sorry, I'm not the best of the chat. Yeah, so if you guys have any thoughts on why nutrition gets harder around the holidays, go ahead and throw it in. Someone said too many sweets and large meals. Definitely. More gatherings. Gatherings are centered around food. That's so true. Yeah, more opinions. People maybe making comments about food. Maybe people talking about their body more. People talking about different foods as good and bad. Those are really great answers. So yeah, I mean, a lot of those are what I have put right here. So some of the challenges around nutrition during the holiday season. One, during the holiday season, social gatherings are abundant, whether it's office parties, family dinners, festive events, with friends, the social aspect. It tends to revolve around food, just like someone had said in the chat. So this can lead to an increase in exposure to tempting treats and just indulgent meals in general. The holidays also bring forth a plethora of those special treats that we don't have at all times of the year, so that can lead to some indulgence. There's also an emotional connection to a lot of the food that we have during the holiday times. It might be really nostalgic, make you think of past memories, something that you want to partake in order to partake in traditions. Which brings us to our next one. Different cultures also have different holiday traditions, and that might involve specific foods that hold cultural significance to them. And we do have that desire to participate and honor these traditions, and it might lead to individuals just consuming more food than they would otherwise consume, or maybe foods that they would avoid for certain health reasons. And then lastly, there is almost a perceived permission during the holidays. So what that means is that many individuals kind of adopt a mindset of, oh, it's a special occasion, so I can indulge. And this mindset can contribute to overeating and making some less mindful decisions on food choices during the holiday season. So all of those things combined, the abundance of food, some food pressures, food norms, whether it's cultural, emotional, during the holidays, what those really lead to, like we had mentioned in the very beginning, can be binge and restrict cycles. So are you guys familiar with binge and restrict cycles? Like maybe put in the chat who has ever overindulged in a meal at a holiday and then skipped the next meal, or the opposite, skipped a meal and then binged later that night at a holiday? Just send something in the chat, like a thumbs up or something. There's a couple. Let's see here.
I have a thumbs up.
So some of you guys, maybe not everyone, which is good. But we're going to break it down a little bit so you can better understand kind of what that looks like. So the issue that comes with holidays sometimes can be those triggers that cause people to overeat. So some of those triggers can include social obligations, the continuous stream of food that people are offering to you. We live in the Midwest. We're often pretty polite and we don't like to say no to people. So that can lead to accepting food. People are kindly offering food. It's hard to say no, even if we're full. And then emotional indulgence is something that we also talked about. And then at the bottom, it's talking a little bit about the psychology of binging and kind of why it happens. So when it comes to the mindset involved, there are a few things that we see. Individuals might adopt thoughts that permit indulgence during the holidays due to that perception of scarcity. So the mindset of, for example, this won't be available later, can contribute to overeating. And when we don't allow ourselves some of those sweets, we don't have most of them throughout the year, or maybe you don't allow yourself to eat certain foods, labeling them as like bad, anything with added sugar. When you get them in a large amount at the holiday season, it's the scarcity mindset of not knowing when you're going to get it again. So feeling like you almost have to eat it all because you don't know when you'll get it again. And that kind of goes into the dichotomy of the all or nothing mindset. I'm either going to have all of this or I'm not going to have any at all. And really what we want to work towards, and what we'll talk about later, is how to include the foods in a moderate way, which can not have a negative health outcome, but also make sure that we aren't feeling restricted in social environments, but really creating a balanced approach to nutrition. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the mindset more. Generally, preceding binge and restrict cycles are unhealthy mindsets around food. So what do you guys, does anyone have any thoughts about what are some things that could be signs of an unhealthy mindset around food? You can throw it in the chat if anyone has ideas. I'll give it a minute here. Like thoughts you might have or behaviors, maybe something you struggle with, something you've seen. Overindulging. Yep, for sure. And that could be due to, you know, lack of mindfulness when we're eating. It could be due to the social pressure. It could be due to emotional reasons. Thinking about how someone may have to compensate for their food choices later. That's a big one. Feeling like we have to earn our food and viewing exercise or restriction as a way of controlling that. Focusing too much on how many calories versus the type of food. That's a good one. To the point, I see that a lot where it becomes to an unhealthy extent. It can be okay to be aware of caloric density, but like knowing our needs, which we'll talk about later, can help us to make informed choices. Be absolutely perfect or eat everything. There's no in between. Yeah, that's super common. And when it comes to nutrition, we want to talk about slow, small, sustainable changes that we can make. Perfection is quite unlikely, and we don't have to eat 100% perfect to have really good health, actually. So those are great. Thank you guys for putting some things in the chat there. So yeah, moving on, some of those signs of an unhealthy mindset around food could be, like someone mentioned, feeling as though you need to earn the food that you eat. So that could be, through exercise. I've heard people say, oh, I'm glad I signed up for a 5K this Thanksgiving because I'm going to eat so much later. Or it could be, extreme guilt when you consume less nutrient dense food. So looking at your food choices from a very emotional standpoint, instead of more of an objective, rational standpoint, that all or nothing mindset, or intentionally skipping meals for a planned binge. And that one is the one I think is very common around the holiday season. We see people wanting to, skip breakfast or skip lunch, when that might actually hinder the outcome that you want to see later, because you're going to have some extreme hunger if you skipped 1 or 2 meals. So some of the self-talk that you might hear or things people might say out loud that can demonstrate maybe an unhealthy relationship with food could be, well, I'll start eating healthy after the holidays, or it's the holidays, I deserve this, I never get this, I'm gonna eat it all. I better skip breakfast to make enough room for dinner tonight. I better hit the gym hard to work all this off tomorrow. In the chat, can you guys just put like a thumbs up or a yes if you've heard anyone say something like this before? Let's see here. Yeah. Yes, my roommate just said that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, there are quite a bit of thumbs up there. So it's pretty common, and I think the fact that it's common makes it feel like it's normal. So it's okay to think about food like that. But really, it doesn't have to be so hard where we're trying to skip meals and control it so much. If we just plan ahead a little bit and talk about some of these strategies that we do later, we can really create a lot of balance and look at food as a way to, from less of maybe an aesthetic point and maybe a holistic well-being tool that we can use to, just help our overall well-being. So now that we've talked about the binge kind of cycle, we're going to talk a little bit about the restrict mode that generally comes either before a binge or after a binge. And I put on there reflecting on the post-holiday regret, because I have seen that quite a bit with people. Often after the festivities, if we overindulge, our inner dialogue can tend to be very shame-based, judgmental, not very objective or always compassionate and rational. One example that I heard another dietitian say, and I don't know if it's the best one, but I'm going to share it. If you walked into somebody else's home and it was messy, a little bit messy, you wouldn't say like, oh my gosh, they failed, like they're doing horrible, they have a messy house. You'd probably just say, oh, it's a little bit messy. And we're all a little bit messy sometimes, but when we have a messy house ourselves, we generally are like, oh my gosh, I can't keep the house clean, I failed. We can have a really negative self-talk, and it's kind of the same way with nutrition. Generally, when we don't do something perfect, or if we overindulge, we tend to have a very judgmental self-talk that we wouldn't have if it was a friend that had eaten something that wasn't perfect. So some of those negative things that we tell ourselves can lead to the guilt and regret and negative self-dialogue, which can eventually lead into more restriction, which will eventually lead into a binge. And it's kind of this cycle that keeps on perpetuating. So what we want to do is we want to break the restrictive cycle, and we want to learn how to foster self-compassion. We want to change that self-talk to be more objective and more compassionate towards ourselves. We want to approach overeating occasions and the results of them. Like, we may not feel great after overeating. We want to approach them pragmatically, so objectively and not as emotionally. We can acknowledge what's true, like, I don't feel great after this, but we don't have to do it in a judgmental way, but we can actually take it as more of a learning opportunity to think about how we want to feel next time when we have the opportunity to make a choice between one food or another. And getting to the last point of emphasizing long-term health, when we view how we eat in perspective of our long-term health, it helps us to look past the immediate situation and change our perspective to more of our lifestyle around food instead of just this one meal. So we remember that one day, one meal, it doesn't make our health. That's not what makes a person healthy. What makes a person healthy is their lifestyle over a long period of time and habits that we have. So now we're gonna get into a little bit more on mindful eating, and I like to call this the cornerstone of holiday well-being. So we'll break it down a little bit more in the next few slides. But essentially, the core principles of mindful eating, they help us to bring awareness to our body's needs and our body's internal cues. When we look at diet culture and we look at the way that a lot of people pursue nutrition, it's based off of a lot of external cues. What is this person eating? What is this person telling me to do? Things we might see in magazines that tell us a diet plan. We tend to veer away from hunger cues, fullness cues, being mindful about our environment, thinking about what we need instead of what someone else tells us we need. So mindful eating kind of goes back to more of an intuitive approach where we're looking at not only some external cues of environment and what your food looks like, but also getting back to some more internal cues that our body was made for. Like, for example, an example of an external cue would be, oh, everyone's having a drink and desserts, and you feel permission to because you see everybody else having it. While an example of an internal cue would be, I feel like I have low energy right now. I'm not going to be able to eat for a few hours. Maybe you have your holiday meal in a few hours and you're really hungry. So you choose some whole grain crackers for carbs because you need energy. And they'll provide you with some fiber. And then you pair it with some cheese to add some protein and fats for staying power until your meal in a few hours. So we can kind of see how the internal cues approach nutrition as a way that is caring for yourself, knowing what you need, and some of the external cues can sometimes push us into a binge restrict cycle where we have some negative self-talk. Not that it always does that, but we want to, with mindful eating, get back to some of those internal cues. So breaking down mindful eating, we're going to look at some of the principles. Mindful eating involves deliberately just paying attention to the present moment without judgment. That means being fully engaged in the act of eating, savoring each bite, appreciating the sensory experience without distractions. So how many of you guys go on your phone while you're eating lunch? I even do that sometimes, super common. You can maybe put something in the chat if you do that. Yeah. Oh yeah, and I do it too. I try to be mindful of it, but we live in a very busy, fast-paced culture. It makes mindful eating kind of hard sometimes, but really we want to be as fully engaged to our meal as possible to really identify some of those internal cues. So yeah, savoring each bite, appreciating the sensory experience without distractions. Like I said, it encompasses both those internal processes. So our thoughts about the food, our emotions around the food, the physical sensations of the food, like, is it crunchy? Is it hot? Is it cold? We all have different likes and preferences. And then the external environment. So the sights around you, being aware of where you are, the smells of the food, the texture, being aware of both, individuals can really develop a deeper connection with their eating experience, and they're going to feel a lot more satisfied with their meal. It helps us to make more intentional and informed choices about what you eat and how much you eat, because we're not so distracted. Sometimes when we eat distracted, we're not even aware that we're full because we're looking at a super stimulating iPhone or TV. So that's one thing to note. With practice, mindfulness can help us to cultivate the possibility of freeing oneself from our reactive and habitual patterns of thinking, feeling, and acting around food. So for you, that might be eating while you're on your phone. Some other habitual practices could be, I'm sure many of you guys have heard of like the Clean Plate Club. It might have been just a little bit about how we were raised, like we have to finish the food on our plate. It could be a habitual practice that we don't even know that we do because we've just done it our whole life and it's been encouraged, even when we're full. Our portion sizes are some habitual practices, like if we're used to large portion sizes, maybe we needed them at one time if we were super active, but then we got used to that, and our portion sizes should be a little different now. That could be a habitual practice. Boredom eating, stress eating, emotional eating. Yeah, those are a couple examples of those habitual patterns of thinking, feeling, and acting around food. And then at the end, I just put mindfulness promotes balance, choice, wisdom, and acceptance of what is. So again, going back to that non-judgmental, objectively looking at your experience with the food you just ate and then learning from it. So some practical tips of how to get started with mindful eating, because it's really hard to change our habits sometimes. So starting even just with one of these and building off each other can be a helpful way. to start to get more in tune with your hunger cues, be more present with your meals, which can help you to really have more satisfaction with your meals and maybe even help you to reach some more health goals. Creating a mindful eating environment involves just being intentional with your environment. Just like we had talked about before, being aware of, are we distracted? Do we have time right now to sit down and eat? It doesn't always look like that. But just trying to be intentional with how we're eating our food. So that goes for the next 2 points as well, trying to slow down a little bit. Like I mentioned before, our culture is kind of a hustle culture where we're really busy and we really pride productivity, which in some ways is awesome. I think that obviously working hard is a great attribute and a great thing, but there are some benefits to slowing down, especially when it comes to eating, giving our body time to actually digest and taste the food, being a little bit more in the moment rather than thinking about the next thing that we have to do is a huge component of mindful eating. After that, we get to the hunger and fullness cues. That is also a fundamental practice of mindful eating. This involves tuning into your body's signals, knowing when to start and when to stop eating. This promotes obviously a more balanced and satisfying eating experience, so we don't get ravenous and extreme hunger to the point where we're uncomfortable, but we also don't get extremely full to the point where it's uncomfortable as well, but knowing when to start eating and when to stop. To break that down a little farther, just so you guys have a little bit of a basis of knowing, what are hunger cues besides your stomach hurting, or fullness cues besides your stomach hurting. Some physical sensations of hunger are truly going to be your stomach growling and a sensation of emptiness or a mild gnawing or hunger pain. It could also look like thinking about food a lot if you're just preoccupied with thinking about it to the point where it's pretty constant. You might need to eat something. An increase in saliva production even can indicate that the body is preparing for digestion. Having a heightened sensitivity to the aroma of food. And then going into fullness cues, some other signs besides obviously some stomach distension can be feelings of satisfaction and contentment, where you're feeling comfortable but not stuffed. A natural slowing down of your eating can be a sign of fullness. Sometimes when we eat, maybe you guys are familiar with this at Thanksgiving or something, and we're eating and we take a deep breath, like during a meal, that can be a sign you're probably getting full. It might be a good idea to slow down. It's kind of a body's cue of we're getting enough. So those are hopefully helpful and a couple of practical things that you can look for to start eating, and some signs to maybe know that you're full or getting full. Moving on to gratitude practices, that can enhance your mindful eating experience. Expressing gratitude for the food, the effort involved in preparation, and the nourishment it provides can bring a positive perspective to the mealtime. I think they found that people who cook at home tend to consume less calories and have more gratitude for the meals that they have prepared because they spent 30-40 minutes preparing it maybe. So maybe that could be something, if your schedule allows, to try to cook at home more and really have gratitude for your meal and the effort that went into preparing it from somebody. And then again, challenging your self-talk. Mindful eating involves challenging negative or unhelpful things that we're saying to ourselves. Ask yourself, is this actually going to help me make a better choice next time? trying to replace some of those judgmental thoughts with more positive and affirming thoughts about ways that you can just make a change next time. That's really something that we want to work on when it comes to mindful eating. So stepping away from body ideals is one thing that I think can be helpful when we talk about navigating nutrition around the holidays. A lot of times people approach nutrition with just a weight goal in mind. And that doesn't mean that we can't pursue weight goals. There's definitely a place for that, and weight loss is not wrong. And sometimes weight gain might be necessary depending on the person. However, we tend to bring nutrition down into just weight centric when there's so many more things that nutrition does for us besides affect our weight. So what I like to encourage people is to switch your perspective and mindset from fueling to look a certain way to fueling to feel well and improve your health. And generally, if we are fueling for our needs, fueling for health and to feel well, our weight is most likely going to get, for most people, to a healthy point. Obviously, there are exceptions. Some people, weight loss is something that's very necessary, but in general, switching our mindset from weight centric to health centric and well-being centric can be really helpful. So we're going to talk about some benefits of fueling for well-being and improved health over just weight. We're going to talk about what we need and knowing the different roles that different foods have in our diet. So like I said, both can be done. We can both work towards weight goals and also fueling to feel well. But we don't want weight to be the sole goal of improving our nutrition. I just put pursuing health, not hyper-focused on weight, helps to take the judgment away too and help us focus on a long-term goal. We're going to move on to the next one. So here we see some other markers of improved health that go beyond weight loss. Weight loss can certainly be a result of improved health, absolutely. But some of these can be, encouraging if you're pursuing some improved nutrition right now. But weight loss takes time, so you might not see it for quite a while. So hopefully these are encouraging for you as you pursue better nutrition to continue doing it, because there are more reasons to do it besides just reaching a certain weight goal. To begin, reduce stress level. Proper nutrition can support the body's resilience to stressors. Number 2, balanced nutrition helps to sustain consistent energy levels throughout the day and promote metabolic function. Also, avoiding extreme diets and overeating, both ends of the spectrum, avoiding them both can contribute to sustained energy levels as well. Improve sleep and sleep quality. I've seen people who restrict a lot and they have sleep problems, or they're overeating maybe at night and they have sleep problems, or even some people who maybe eat at night in the middle of the night. When we improve our nutrition and our eating pattern, even, it can actually help our sleep hygiene. The next one is going to be enhanced cognitive function. So a well-balanced diet can support optimal brain health. Think about omega-3s, for example. They've been shown to help with our brain health. Boosted mood and happiness. This one I think is really interesting, and there's a lot more research being done on this. Balanced nutrition plays a role in promoting a positive outlook, for sure, having a healthy relationship with food. But there's new research that's showing a connection between diet and mental health. Diet's certainly not the sole solution to mental health. There are a lot of things that are necessary to help with mental health, but newer research shows it might play a role in our mood, and that there might be some connection between our brain and our gut, like an axis that can communicate and affect our mood, which I think is so interesting. Number 6, when combined with exercise, nutrition can certainly aid in improving strength, muscle building, and even just endurance and recovery. Hormonal health for number 7, a well-balanced diet can support your hormonal health. Number 8, digestive and gut health. We think about fiber and probiotics. Those are a few that my brain goes to right away. They play a significant role in microbiome and digestive health. Number 7, skin health. Certainly certain nutrients contribute to a radiant and healthy complexion. But also this can go for our hair and nails as well. I think about protein. If we're not getting adequate protein, we might see that come up as weak hair or weak nails. So having improved nutrition can improve that area. And then lastly, improved bone health and heart health. Vitamins and minerals that we need are super important for maintaining proper bone health, and minerals for our heart health as well. So those are just a few things that go beyond weight loss that are really interesting and hopefully motivating for you to pursue nutrition, even if you haven't experienced weight loss, or if it's been something hard for you in the past. There are more reasons to pursue better nutrition. So now we're going to dive in a little bit to our needs. Obviously, everyone's needs are different, but we're going to talk about it on a more of a macro scale, the types of food we need, and then how to balance those types of foods, knowing what our body needs. So obviously for this one, I included it as sort of a plug to go see a dietitian if you have the ability to. Everyone's needs are going to be individual, especially when it comes to calories, and everyone has different activity levels. So knowing your needs can be really helpful to see a dietitian to get some help with that. But our hunger and fullness cues can also be really good indicators of when we should eat. And we're going to talk more about food groups coming up, which will show us the different food groups that we need as well. So now we're getting into types of food needed. We're going to start off with macronutrients. So we need protein, carbohydrates, and fat. And I'm just going to quickly, because I see it's already been 34 minutes. So I'm going to quickly review just why we need each of them, kind of their function. There's a lot of fad diets out there that really focus on a different macronutrient, excuse me. You can think of keto. They're demonizing carbs. You can think of a vegan diet, which would reduce our protein and fat, possibly, depending on the different foods that you're eating. But it is very carbohydrate focused. So what we want to do is know what the purpose of all of them are, know that we need all of them, and then we'll talk about how to include them in our diet. So starting off with protein, it's going to be crucial for building and repairing tissues, especially our muscles. Sources are lean meats, poultry, fish, eggs, dairy, beans. Some plant-based options also are going to be tofu and tempeh. Protein aids in satiety, so adding it to our meals is going to help us to feel a feeling of fullness and satisfaction. So that is important to prevent overeating. It also helps with our cellular function. So they support our body's structure, facilitating biochemical processes. Carbohydrates, they're our body's main source of energy. So when we cut carbohydrates out completely, we're probably going to feel some brain fog. We're going to feel pretty tired because our body was designed to run off of carbohydrates. So generally, I recommend people opt for whole grains, fruits and vegetables, and beans to provide a steady release of energy, as all of those sources have some fiber. Let's see here. Moving on to fats serve as a concentrated energy source for us. So as opposed to protein and carbs, which have 4 calories per gram, fat's actually going to have 9 calories per gram. So it's a little bit more concentrated energy source, and it's crucial for the absorption of fat soluble vitamins. It's also important for our hormonal health, and it's integral for our cellular membranes, contributing to integrity of cells throughout the body. So now that we see the 3 macronutrients, they're all important. We shouldn't eliminate one of them. We're going to look at the 5 main food groups. Does anyone think they can name the 5 main food groups in the chat? That's kind of a big question. It might take a little bit to type. For time's sake, I think there we go. Grains, veggies, fruit, dairy, sweets. That was a good guess. That's most of them. Grains, veggies, fruit, dairy, protein. Yeah, nice. Yep. So you guys were either pretty close or spot on, but these are going to be the 5 main food groups that we have in our diet. We have fruits, vegetables, grains, protein, and dairy. Some people say for dairy, like a vitamin D calcium source. So a lot of dairy alternatives will be supplemented with those, but dairy generally is going to be one of the 5. And those are super important. They're going to give us all of our macronutrients if we are including all of the food groups. And this is a picture of the MyPlate, which is the USDA's recommendation for how we should portion out our plate. It's an easy way to view our needs as a plate, using a plate method instead of counting calories. If we're using appropriate portion sizes, we're generally going to be getting what we need. So now we get to balancing the pleasure of food and our needs. So it's important to recognize that food plays a significant role in celebrations and social gatherings. Shared meals enhance social connections. It creates a sense of community. So we should acknowledge that less nutrient-dense foods, they serve a purpose often, more so for social settings and pleasure factors rather than meeting specific physical health and nutrient needs. So that's a really important thing to know, because knowing that it doesn't serve necessarily our health goals that are physical and meeting a lot of nutrient needs, we can know how to properly include them in our diet and in what amount. So there is a place for these less nutrient-dense foods in a balanced diet. Enjoying these foods occasionally as part of a social gathering or special occasion definitely contributes to a healthy relationship with food. The important thing to do is just be aware of portion sizes, the frequency in indulging in some of these less nutrient-dense foods, and knowing that moderation is key to overall nutritional balance in your diet. So now we get into some more of the practical application of next week when you go home for Thanksgiving or maybe over Christmas break. What are some strategies that you can put in place for navigating nutrition at holiday gatherings? This is a brief overview. We're going through all of the courses that you might experience during a holiday, whether it's before the meal, during the meal, after, whatever it is. We're going to talk about some strategies of how we can plan ahead and really take care of ourselves and give ourselves what we need without feeling deprived and entering back into a binge restrict cycle, which we want to put a stop to. So starting with before we go, I think I asked this earlier and a couple of you had put in the chat, like, yeah, I've skipped a meal before a holiday. That's what we don't want to do. So I challenge you guys this year that if you're typically skipping lunch and skipping breakfast, try to include it this year. And here's why we don't necessarily want to skip meals. We want to avoid extreme hunger in order to combat the overeating later. Generally, when we deprive ourselves early in the day, we feel permission to really overeat later in the day. And it's not ideal for our metabolism and our relationship with food. So I challenge you guys to not skip your meals before you go to your events this holiday season. Just be aware of what you're going to need throughout the day, what's going to be there later, and plan ahead. One thing I like to encourage people to do also is to reflect on what your favorite holiday foods are. What's going to be there tonight that you really want? One thing I had put in another slide that we'll see soon that I heard another dietitian say is you can have anything, but you can't have it all at once. So we can include some of those less nutrient dense foods in strategically to our meals and our snacks on a holiday, but we can't necessarily have everything all at once because we're probably not going to feel great, and we want to fuel for how we want to feel. So plan ahead, know what foods your mom is going to bring or your family members are going to bring, and try to incorporate them in that plate method, knowing what you need, which goes to the last point, just being aware of your needs. And now we're gonna move to snacks and appetizers. Maybe not everyone has this one, but our family always has food put out for people to graze on before meals. Veggies might not always be an option. If they're there, they're a great way to create that satiety before your meal, so that you can make it to your next meal without being so ravenous. Portion control is something that we've talked about quite a bit already. Remember that the snacks and appetizers are meant to get you to the next meal, not fill you up before the next meal. So use them as something to help you not be ravenous at your meal, but we also don't want to be overly full before we start. So snacking strategically can also be helpful. So maybe snacking in a way that's not sitting next to the whole grazing table. It can promote some mindless eating. So getting your snack on a plate and going and sitting somewhere where it's not right next to the grazing table can be helpful. Staying hydrated can also help. Obviously, we should never try to ignore our hunger by just chugging water. But if we aren't hydrated, that can affect how well we break down food. We also just always want to focus on hydration. So drinking water before we eat can be a helpful way to even just be more mindful of how hungry we are. We've talked about mindful eating a lot, so I'll leave that one there. But again, encouraging you, balance is key, just plan ahead. Getting to the main course. Including color, as we saw in the My Plate method, about half of that plate was fruits and vegetables. That is the goal, but perfection doesn't always happen. Maybe the meal that you're going to doesn't have that many vegetable selections. Do the best that you can to try to get, a third of your plate or half of your plate to be colorful, but certainly it's not always available when you go somewhere else to eat. When it comes to starch selections, so we're thinking bread, stuffing, sweet potato, rolls, all those things that are at holiday seasons. Typically, I recommend choosing a complex carb, something with fiber, because it's gonna aid in your digestion, and slow down the glucose rise after consuming some carbs. However, in the event of a holiday meal, I want you to focus more on the portion size and what's going to make you feel most satisfied. So we want to try to avoid some of those feelings of deprivation by maybe choosing the white roll that doesn't have fiber, but you really enjoy it because it's going to add to the overall satisfaction of the meal. I want you to focus more on the portion size of it being, maybe a fourth of your plate. All right. Mindful nutrition. I have this on everyone. We've talked about it quite a bit. So considering your needs, but listening to your preferences and trying to work them in together. Protein source at meals is super important because it's going to help you to be satisfied and balanced. We talked about portion control. Cooking methods can be something to think about for your main course. If you're preparing food, opting for like roasting or grilling instead of like using a lot of oil or frying. Those are things that if you're cooking, you might have control over, or you might not have control over. The anything but not everything mindset. I think I had mentioned this in the first one, that allowing yourself to have foods that you enjoy. We just can't have everything all at once. So trying to be mindful of including them in a moderate and healthy way, and not everything all at once, with the perspective of looking ahead to how we want to feel, instead of not eating everything at once to look a certain way. Like I said, with mindful eating, thinking about our environment, our hunger and fullness cues. And then I think a leftover strategy can be a helpful thing to remember, especially if you're like a clean plate club person, thinking of a strategy of like planning for leftovers. If I don't eat this all, I can just save it for later. It helps us to avoid some overeating at holidays. Getting to the desserts now. I think it's really important to try to take the novelty of it away. So removing the way you talk about less nutrient dense foods, such as a good or a bad food, that can be really helpful to take away the novelty of those less nutrient dense foods. Instead, allow yourself some of those less nutrient dense foods maybe more often in small amounts. So that you don't feel like they're so novel when it comes to holiday time, and you feel like you have to overindulge on them because you don't know when you'll get it again, or when you'll allow yourself to have something that's maybe has more sugar again. And then again, being present in the moment, knowing that food serves more for the social and emotional aspect, which means we should probably have it in a smaller amount because it's not serving us in our nutrition greatly. And then lastly, alcohol and sweet beverages. The alcohol is obviously for anyone 21 plus, but in consuming alcohol does increase our appetite a little bit, and it can help us be less mindful, and we generally will overconsume calories. So that's something to be mindful of. Maybe have one drink or choose something that's a little bit has maybe fewer calories. But when we're looking at holiday drinks, choose one that you enjoy the most, but limit it to an 8-ounce portion to minimize the added sugar. That was a lot. I am sure some of you guys have questions. So now is the time, if you have any other thoughts regarding to nutrition that you want to ask. I know I took up quite a bit of time, Melissa, but if anyone has questions, totally feel free to throw them in the chat, or unmute yourself and ask them. This is kind of your opportunity to do that. Do you have any advice on how to manage family pushing foods onto you? That's a great question. As far as family pushing foods onto you, it might just be uncomfortable, but learning how to say no in a really polite way can be really helpful. Showing gratitude that they would offer it to you. Like, you know, it could look like someone, hey, have this caramel roll for breakfast or whatever it is. And if you know you're not going to feel great afterwards, and you don't genuinely want it, you could always say, those look great. I bet they taste delicious. You know, I actually, last time I had one, I didn't feel great, and I really want to have a lot of energy today. So I think I might skip for now, but maybe next time I'll have a little bit of one. Like, thanks for offering. I really appreciate it. Just being really humble, non-judgmental that they would eat it, and appreciating them for asking, but also being able to say no. It's going to be uncomfortable to say no to someone. I mean, we live in I think the Midwest, it's really hard to say no. And yeah, so hopefully that was helpful. If anyone else has any tips, you can definitely share in the chat, because maybe someone else has some other tips for how to handle family pushing food onto you. Yeah, thank you guys for letting me speak today. I saw a couple of thank yous, and I don't see any other questions. If anyone else has one, maybe we'll give it another minute, but
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. If you have any final thoughts or wonderings or questions, please put them in the chat. Yeah, thank you so much, Michaela. This was a really great presentation, a lot of great information, and a lot of, I think each of us can take away different pieces and keep that in mind, not only for the holidays, but in just day to day. All that information is great, and we can apply in our own different ways. So yeah, perfect.
yeah,
One reminder, I know we kind of have people popping off already. Lunchtime is over, right? But I did just want to share that our final series or think session within the semester series will be on Wednesday, November 29th, and that session will be focusing on mindfulness techniques. And so more to come on that topic and registering for that. But if that is of interest, that will be happening in a couple weeks here, and that will be our final think session of the semester. So just to keep that noted for any and all that are keeping up with our sessions. Thank you again, Michaela. And I'm not seeing any additional questions in the chat here. Thank you all for joining us today, and thank you, Michaela, for presenting. And I'll plan to stay on until about noon here if anybody has any questions or different things that they'd like to share until then. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining.
thanks,
I
Melissa.
really appreciate it. Yes. Thank you for sharing your expertise, Michaela.
Of course, it's my pleasure.
Wonderful. Have a great weekend, everybody. Enjoy your holidays. Perfect. Yeah. Rahila, great question. So we will plan to, so we did record the session, and typically what we'll do is within the Student Health Service webpage, we do have like a tab under health promotion labeled Think. And so we're going to be working to get some of these recordings for the many sessions we had this semester up on there. So hopefully within the next, week or, hopefully no longer than that, but that will come up on the Student Health Service webpage.
Cool, sweet. I'll tell some students that are coming in. Actually, it's probably gonna be after Thanksgiving until I see people, but yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's a great reminder, and we have Thanksgiving, and then we have following holidays, and a good reminder for, I mean, I think there's some holidays that like we're like, oh, even like July 4th sometimes I think of, and like the whole, barbecuing and different. I mean, I think it's like in my mind, I see it as less of like a desserts kind of thing, although I see that, but like,
Yeah,
but I definitely, people come in and they're like the processed food, the like barbecuing, the hot dogs and like the,
yeah,
and even like drinking, I feel like, people go out on the lakes and on their, things like that. Like I grew up in
yeah,
Broken Rapids, so that was lakes area,
yeah,
and
for
so I
sure.
very much that's what I kind of think of. So,
Yeah,
it's, applicable all the time. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to track how many people see that the
cool.
presentation that way as well. So
That's
that'll
sweet.
thank you. This was really great. I needed
Yeah,
this, truthfully.
yeah. No, I really enjoyed it. So
It
yeah,
was
this
great.
is fun.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you. We can, maybe even next week after we have some time to digest, if you have any thoughts or things that, moving forward, even like with this program can be different or like that would have helped you in planning or guiding or things like that, just let us know. We always want to improve, and, any takeaways are always appreciated. So we can plan to continue connecting on all these different pieces. So
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks, Melissa.
yeah, thank you so much.
Right.
Do you have a lot of clients the rest of the day?
I had one girl is sick, so she's not coming in. So I think I have 2 or 3 this afternoon. So it'll be good. Kind of
Yeah,
steady, but not too much.
good
So
balance. Good deal.
yeah.
Well, I'll
Yeah.
let you get off to all your other things before after you see them. And yeah,
Sure.
thank you so much. We'll touch
Yeah.
base soon. Thanks.
Yeah. See you guys.
Bye.